Do you think that someone's view in Israel can put them in danger of losing their salvation?
Well, I think having a wrong view of Israel can become a tremendous distraction from what Christianity is and from what our duty is. And obviously, being distracted could interfere with our obedience. It could interfere with our effectiveness, our fruitfulness. Um, I won't comment on whether it'll affect our salvation. It might. I do believe there is a danger of idolizing Israel. Now, if you have an idol, that certainly could endanger your salvation, I would think, because idolatry is a departure from God, putting something else as the main focus of your affection and loyalty in the place of where God belongs. And I do believe some people have that attitude toward Israel. I'll just give you some personal testimony a little about that. I was raised in a dispensational setting. Now, dispensationalism is the theory that Israel is the most important nation in the end times, that we are living in the end times, and that support of Israel is essentially support of God Himself. I mean, that Israel, that God's heart is with Israel. They're the apple of His eye. Support of Israel is the only way to be on good terms with God. And I was young. I mentioned I started in the ministry when I was 16, but I was very heavily under dispensational teaching. And I'm not saying that my teachers taught me to do this, but this was a natural effect, I think, of the teaching. I tended to almost revere a Jew. If I met a Jew, I tended to revere him. Oh, this is one of the people of God. This is one of God's special people. And I again, young and unbalanced, I used to I used to wear a Star of David with a cross in it, and identify myself as a completed convert to Judaism, or a convert to completed Judaism, or whatever, And and I actually, when I was young and single, this is a little embarrassing to admit, but this is the mentality that we had. I thought, if I could marry a Jewish Christian girl, which, by the way, I didn't, but I thought then my children would be Jewish, because the definition of a Jew in modern times is having a Jewish mother. So if my children would have a Jewish mother, they'd have all the advantages of being Jews. Now, it might seem funny because a lot of Jews would say, advantages. It's been the worst blight that's been upon our race as being Jews, because of all the persecution and anti-Semitism and so forth they've suffered. But from the standpoint of a dispensationalist, the Jews are God's favorite. He's going to do things for them He wouldn't do for anyone else, they just kind of carry about with them a special dignity and honor that God, esteems to them. And so I thought, well, the best thing I could do to my children is give them a Jewish mother, so they'd be Jewish too. Now, I don't think anything like that anymore, and I didn't think that for very long. I ended up marrying a Gentile woman, so that dream didn't last long, but it certainly was on my mind at one point. So this is almost idolatry. I still was a follower of Jesus. But I remember in my teenage years, I was a pacifist. I registered as a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. And I remember having other people think like me, and I thought this way too, that, I don't believe in fighting a war, but if I did, I would go and fight for Israel. I would fight a war for Israel because I know God's on their side. So this is the mentality that dispensationalism sometimes breeds. I'm not saying every dispensationalist has this kind of imbalance, but I think some of them almost do. I'm just saying how extreme I was. And yet, as I study my Bible more, I realized that God doesn't have an unconditional esteem for Israel. In fact, He's not even for the holiest people in Israel, the priest. In 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 30, God was rebuking, or a prophet was rebuking Eli, the priest, the Israeli priest, the high priest, and said, I said that your house and the house of your fathers would be priests before me forever. But he said, but now, God says, far be it from me. For those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me, I will lightly esteem. Now, God made it very clear that this is not only an Israelite, but a Levite. Not only a Levite, but a high priest. And God says, listen, I know I made promises to you guys, and I said it'd be forever, but listen, this is conditional. If you honor me, I'll honor you. If you don't, I won't. And that was always written into the promises God made to the Jews. If you honor me, if you keep my covenant, if you obey my voice, you'll be a peculiar people to me. You'll be a special treasure to me. You'll be a holy nation. You'll be a kingdom of priests. Yeah, well, that's if. And somehow Christians who are dispensationalists have lost sight of that if. And they don't realize, and I think a lot of Christians don't know this, they kind of picture Israel. I mean, American Christians and Christians who aren't in the Middle East, they often picture Israel as kind of a nation that's seeking after God, and all they lack is to know who Jesus is, and we want to teach them who Jesus is, because then they'll be saved too. Well, I'm in favor of evangelizing Jewish people, but people need to understand Israel is not a religious nation. It's a secular democracy, just like America is, frankly. It's not Christian. It's not religious at all. I mean, it's got freedom of religion for the most part. So you can be a Buddhist or a Hindu or an atheist. And by the way, a very large percentage, probably as many as are religious Jews, are atheist Jews in Israel. I mean, atheism is as common among the Jews as Judaism is. And as far as Christianity is concerned, less than 1% of the Israelis in Israel of the Jews in Israel are Christians. So this is a secular nation. And in many cases, they have targeted Christianity as the one religion that they're least tolerant of and have persecuted more than most. For example, if you're a Jewish Buddhist in Israel, no one will object to that. If you're a Messianic Jew in Israel, well, you are viewed with some contempt. And in fact, I have a Christian Jewish friend who was a Buddhist Jew. He's not in Israel, he's in America, but this is fairly typical. There's a lot of Jewish Buddhists, but he said when he became a Christian, he found it more difficult to tell his Jewish mother about this than when he became a Buddhist. He says she had no objection to him becoming a Buddhist, but she thought he'd betrayed the faith when he became a Christian. So this is how Israelis, for the most part, feel about Christianity. They're not a religious people. And if they are religious, it's almost like any religion except Christ, except Christianity. So this is not people who are honoring God or Christ. These are people who are, 99% of them are anti-Christ. I mean, frankly, I don't say that to criticize them more than other races. I think most of your Gentiles in America are anti-Christ, because John said whoever denies that Jesus is the Messiah is antichrist in 1 John chapter 2. So anyone who denies Jesus is the Messiah is antichrist, and that would make Israel and most of America and almost all of Europe antichrist also. The point is, many people think of Israel as distinctive from other pagan nations, as if it's not antichrist, even though they reject Christ, where everyone else, of course, is pagans outside of Israel. Israel is just another nation. And to say that if you don't support Israel, you're going to be cursed. Well, wait a minute. Ever read the prophets in the Old Testament? It sounds like the most condemning passages about Israel are found in the book of Jeremiah and the book of Ezekiel, and many of the prophets. They were they were very critical of Israel because Israel was worshiping other gods, or at least not honoring the covenant they had with God. So apparently inspired prophets inspired by the Holy Spirit can say very negative things about Israel when it's in disobedience, which it is today. I mean, in disobedience to Christ and to God, certainly.